Okay, here is the mountain tutorial. This picture here is the goal. And what we're looking for here is a deep understanding of atmospheric perspective. You've probably seen a vista that looks like this before. Just look up Blue Ridge Mountains and you'll see this effect. You'll see how you get these layers in the foreground that kind of recede into the background. And then I've chosen a clear sky for this because I don't want to get into cloud painting. But I want you to understand the atmospheric perspective that happens with the sky as well. So the sky goes from blue, fades down to white towards the horizon. And then as you push back, things just kind of fade and blue out. And the reason for that, as I said before, is the air is not clear. It's full of little particles of water and other stuff. So all that haze, all that moisture eventually just sort of obfuscates your view. And then things being far away messes with the resolution. So like, well, up here you can see like grass or trees or whatever this blobbiness is, and here you can see less of it. And then it's just kind of like a shape, and then it's like barely a shape. So we're gonna think about this in 4 layers. We're gonna have a foreground layer that's like kind of green and really with us, kind of like the foreground of our trees. Then we're gonna have this kind of mid-ground layer here where we can still see some green, but some blue. And then this like further almost background, and then this like background layer here. So like 4 layers of mountains, so we get different stuff going on. Also in the Smoky Mountains, we get this thing that happens where moisture settles in these valleys, creating this fog. So while they're dark up here, they fade down up here because that fog scatters the light. And so we get that down here. We have a little bit of it here, quite a bit of it here, a good bit of it here. So we're working on that. We don't get much of it here in the foreground. So that's what we're gonna do. So that is our goal. All right, set that to the side. All right, so on this one, you really do wanna tape your paper down because we're gonna lay in washes over the whole area. That's gonna help things go on smoothly. So you really do wanna tape your paper down. And that's gonna keep it from buckling around. If you don't tape your paper down, or if you can't tape your paper down, I understand. Just tape it to your cutting mat. Hopefully that's a good enough surface for you. If you can't tape it down, what's gonna happen is it's gonna curl up and it's gonna send your washes off pooling in directions you don't want them to pool. And we wanna try to avoid that. So tape your papers. Painter's tape is great if you have it. Masking tape is okay if you don't. Even Scotch tape would do in a pinch. Painter's tape is meant to be removed, so that's kind of a good thing. I'm not really measuring how far in from the edge. If you're planning on this being like a work of art, you may want to measure in from the edge. All right, and then I'm gonna take a pencil. So I got that ready to go. I'm gonna take a pencil and I'm just gonna mark out sort of where my lines are gonna be. So my first line, my first layer of line, I don't even know if the camera's gonna pick up this line, is gonna be a bit jumpy because the trees are still have shapes there. And then we get this sort of layer coming in here, little mountainy layer, and another mountainy layer here, and then our mostest background layer here. And then all this will be sky. And this is, yours doesn't have to look like mine. You don't need to copy this. I just want a couple little layers of mountains sort of overlapping, and these lines don't have to be very dark. All right. And it's good while you're doing this to go ahead and pull up a picture of like the Blue Ridge Mountains that kind of looks like this. I'll drop one that I looked at into the Discord server so you guys can see it. It's good while you're doing it to have that, to kind of have something to mimic. But here we go. And here I got my paint. It's the same paint I was using yesterday. I added a little bit to the colors I knew I was going to use a lot of. So we've got the raw sienna, the yellow, the crimson, the viridian hue, and the, actually it's not viridian hue, it's actual viridian, and the ultra blue. So the first color I want to mix up is actually the sky color, which is going to be, I'm going to put my water cups out of camera sight. Camera, I might still pick those up, I don't know. I'm actually going to put them over here because that blocks my light. Okay, So the first thing we want to do is mix up our sky color. You can see I've got Wells here, Payne's Gray. I'm actually going to leave those. I'm going to go ahead and mix over here. And the sky color is going to be ultra blue and water. And water. And it's also going to be a little bit of Viridian. So it's kind of a tealy color. That nice, like kind of almost Caribbean blue. Cameras often, well, photographers lie about what color that really is. It's usually pretty washed out. And even now, this is almost a phthalo blue color here. So I'm adding that. I don't want it to be super saturated, so I am going to add a little touch of that yellow ochre just to grade up just a tiny bit so that it's a more believable, realistic color. And you can see here, I don't know if you can pick up my test sheet. I'm going to test that out, and I actually want that to be a little more green. I'm going to pick that up. Okay, so I'm happy with that color. Make sure I got enough of it. I'm going to add some water to it. We're going to do probably more than one wash on the sky. So I'm just gonna get a starter wash here. Now the secret to the sky, it's the sky. A secret to the sky is to getting it smooth, is to put a wash down. That's better. Is to put a layer of water down. And this is just a wet, big brush. Hopefully I tried to give you all a big brush with your things. Hopefully you have a relatively large brush. And if I overlap the mountain line a little bit, that's okay. But I'm gonna lay the water down and look at it from the side too, make sure it's not pooling anywhere. I want it to be wet, but not sopping. And the wonderful effect of capillary action is gonna prevent my watercolor from getting really blotchy. If I've got that water sitting there. So I'm gonna pick up some water, and I'm gonna pick up that watery sky color. I'm just gonna lay that, and you can see how it just kind of automatically bleeds when I put it on there. Isn't that lovely? And I'm only gonna actually put it at the top part of it. And I'm gonna use my big brush with just water to pull it down. And even though my line here isn't even, the sky kind of fades out evenly. So I've got that looks like that part there didn't get totally wet. All right. So you can see how it already wants to come back and forth. So I'm just gonna kind of blend this back and forth, and I may pick up some color just to make sure it's not too pooling. You can see you can pull it down, you can kind of blend it this way a little bit. And as long as you come back across it this way, it'll even out pretty well. Oh, look, it's dry there. That's not what I want. And I've come into my mountain line a little bit, and that's okay. I'm totally happy with it. All right, there's gonna be lots of breaks in this video to go pet your cat, because you kind of have to work in washes and make sure things dry in between layers. So this is a patience building exercise. And you don't want to do what I'm trying to do here, which is to keep working it in hopes that it'll be perfect the first time around. What I don't like right now that's going on is, one, I want to make sure I want to lift up some water here towards the top. I don't want it to be too blobby. And two, it's actually not quite as dark as I'd like it to be across the top. I would like it to be dark here, but I'm going to lay that in a separate wash, and that's okay. Because I've got a start of a fade going on here. And that's not perfect, but it's just the starting layer. All right, now I'm going to work on, I'm going to mix up the colors for these 3 layers. This layer has some more complicated colors, but just like your trees, we're gonna have like a watery Payne's gray, a less watery Payne's gray. This here is a Payne's gray with some green highlights on the edge of the mountain because the sun kind of comes in there and picks that up. So we're gonna work with that. We're gonna try to get that going. And you can see here between this, like I have more saturated color here, but I did this in 2 washes too. Okay, coffee. It's important to have a latte when you're painting. Because that'll keep you going. Well, keeps me going. All right, so Payne's gray. I'm gonna pick up some of my blue. Oh, goody. Oh, goody, goody. It is okay. Blot it up. Look, no harm, no foul. That's all gonna get color on it anyway. Nothing ruined, but I am gonna move these water cups over here. I'm trying to find the right spot for them. With all this painting, I'm actually gonna move my color line over here. Nope, that's not a good place. We're just gonna deal with it. All right, that's good. All right, so that's gonna be my Payne's gray, and I'm gonna pick up some Viridian. That's not the right color. I'm just kidding. I think on my Payne's gray, it's just the navy, the ultra blue, and the raw sienna. More raw sienna. Test. Good. So I've got Payne's gray and very watery Payne's gray. Okay. Again, I'm going to take this big wash brush and I'm going to block in these areas with water. This is mostly dried. Probably should wait till it's all the way dry, but I don't want to wait 5 hours to make this video. And I've blended off into this mountain a little bit. In fact, I could probably lay the wash down in all these mountains. Probably lay a wash down on all 4. Very similar wash. So basically we'll lay one wash down here and it will be good for this mountain. We probably won't have to do much else, maybe another little wash on this, and then this one will have to be fussed with, and this one will have to be fussed with more, and the foreground has to be fussed with quite a bit. But it's all about working in layers and having patience. Now remember too, on these, we're trying to get the idea of the smoky part of the Smoky Mountains. So I'm gonna start laying in this wash at the top. That's my darker one, not my watery one, which I did on purpose. This, unlike the sky, can be a little blotchy because mountains have like divots and valleys and stuff in them. Thundery day for painting. I don't know if y'all can hear the thunder, but it's definitely thundering. Alright, pull that down. And you can use a big brush here if you want to, if you need to. Should be a little bit of blue here at the bottom. Fog isn't totally white, but it definitely fades up. And one thing to know about it fading up is it doesn't fade up in a line like this. Like the horizon is the horizon, it's level. So like the fade, this should all fade down to like the same level here. Like the white doesn't come up in line with the angle of the mountain, it comes up in line with the angle of the horizon. That's how the fade should feel. Same thing with the sky. Like the sky will actually be darker here and more white there because that's how that works. And there's an example of what happens when you try to lift something while it's still wet and why you want to wait for your layers to dry. And I just need to stop working that. She says as she continues to work it. Now here with this one, the very edge of it is actually this green color. It's okay if I get a little blue there, but I'm going to actually try to concentrate the blue here. And if I get that wrong, I can come back and lift that with something like a Q-tip, which I'm pretty sure I did on the original. That's how I got that as smooth as it is. But I'm just trying to get the beginnings of my washes in. So this mountain is tricksy because it goes green here at the edge where the sun hits it, and then it goes white here at the bottom. But because it's closer, like the effect of the fog isn't quite as big. So you get that down here, but back up here, it probably you wouldn't get the fog because it's up higher. Remember, all that fog has to sit at like the same level. Similar. And I'm trying to prevent water lines from where it's starting to pool right here. I'm kind of picking that up and working it. Blending that water out. All right, now that's probably fine for a first layer. That's good to sit there. All right, now I want to work on the foreground. Now the foreground is a totally different color altogether. The foreground color, we're going to actually mix a very light green. We're going to mix the lightest color that we would see in the foreground, which is like a springy grass green. So we're going to take our Viridian. Make sure you've got a really clean brush before you go try to pick up some yellow. This has been sitting here since yesterday, so it's a little dried out. Viridian and some nice yellow. Get a lovely like springy grass green. Now that's very neon colored, which is nice, but maybe not what we're going for in this drawing. So how would I tone that down? Like a little bit of the red, or even orange, which will help you keep the yellow in the color while taking out some of the darkest greens. We don't need that much. And I like to paint it on the side of the well before I kind of mix it and sort of know how much I have on there. That's why you see me like hitting the side of the well and then pulling it in. Helps prevent disasters. That was almost a disaster. There we go. That's a nice like earthy, sappy green. But I think I'm gonna need more of it to block this whole area in. You can see a test of it over here. It's like a nice kind of springy green that isn't too highlighting. You'll see from watching me paint that I almost never use a color. I work with primary colors and never use them straight out of the pot. So hopefully you don't have too hard a time mixing color, but the more you mix color, the better you'll be at it. You see I've broken this front area into 2 chunks, and that's because I want to. You could have yours be 1 chunk. I don't care what you do. It is The 2020 Apocalypse. You have as many mountains as you want. The first one of these I started, actually, I had like 30 different mountains over here. And I was like, and we'll do a sunset too. And I was like an hour and a half into this and I realized this is probably not a good first project for you. So we're going with the simpler 4 mountains. So I got that water laid in there. And again, that's gonna help my paint go on smoother. I don't care too much at all about the foreground because that's definitely gonna get a lot of texture and stuff in it. So whatever happens in this part is what happens. What happens in the foreground stays in the foreground. And just mash my paint on there. This is a good idea. If you're not sure you have enough color, it can be a good idea to kind of spread it out across the canvas as opposed to dumping it all in one area and then running out on the other side. Now at least if I run out and I have to add another wash, I have to kind of add it everywhere. And it'll all kind of blend in. And if I've got some tiny little white spots left over through here, that's gonna be fine. We're just getting our starting washes. You can see here where it got a little blotchy on that. That's where I had too much water and I got some watermarks. I'm not really concerned about that there because that's going to have a lot of tree and texture in it and so many more layers. But that's a good place for it to be. And in a minute here, we're going to take a break. And now is the time to take a break. So we've got our beginning washes and we've got that blue sky wash and then the Payne's Gray kind of mountain washes, and we'll come back and we'll build those up until we get to the level that's in the sample. And then we've got our foreground wash. And this is how you gotta do it. You gotta work in these layers. All right, let's go have a cat petting break. Okay, so these washes are all dry now, so we're gonna go back to the sky. Every time I say the sky, I think about dear Hunter Foster, Mr. Bobby Strong. Okay, so we're going to pick up our blue. We're gonna make some more sky color. We don't have enough to do another layer. And this one, I'm gonna feel safe in making it a little more saturated. Because I don't have to pull it all the way down this time. I can only pull it halfway down, but I do have to add water everywhere. And when I add water over the paint that's already there, that'll also help smooth it out. So that's my Viridian, my Caribbean sky. Love that. And then just that little touch of yellow ochre. That's not yellow ochre, raw sienna. Yellow ochre is very similar to raw sienna, but it's more yellow. It's that nice cornflower blue. All right, so I'm happy with that color. But the first thing I need to do is take my clean water, and I'm terrible about remembering which water to put it in, but it does help to have 2 cups. I'm gonna put that water down again. So I'm working in another wet on wet. What this is called. Really good for smooth skies. And again, I kind of look at it from the side, make sure that everything's wet, but nothing's pooled. And I add my color in. Gonna let that soak into the paper. And do its capillary thing for just a second before I start lifting with this brush.
I don't know if that helps. But I don't like doing anything. Secret to watercolors, having the patience. I don't know what that accent is. All right, so now into the mountains. On this mountain and this mountain, I'm gonna keep laying in the water because I want them to stay really smooth in their washes. So I'm gonna lay in a layer of water for this mountain, and this mountain I'm gonna add some more Payne's Gray to them. Wow, that was eventful. Okay. Water. You almost want to think about this like wiping it with a sponge so that it gets wet, but it shouldn't be like a pool of water. You can see too when the water hits it, it kind of reactivates the streaky bits in a way that you couldn't do when you're trying to work it while it's drying. It's like this magic thing. The patience will reward you. All right, so I've just washed in these two. We're gonna do some different stuff with this one moving forward. So I'm gonna taking my Payne's Gray, and I'm gonna add that in there. And now is a time where you can start giving the mountains a little bit of personality if you want. Like maybe this one has like a little kind of valley in here that kind of gets shaded in. This mountain painting might have more fog than my other mountain painting. And so do the Smoky Mountains. They are not the same level of fog every day. All right, love that, very happy with that. Don't touch it. Oh wait, I'm gonna touch it. Don't like the top there. Try to smooth that out. Let's get some more paint in there. Fuzziness going on there where it blends into the other mountain, but that is okay. I'm actually going to take this more watery Payne's Gray here to darken up this one, because I want to make sure that this one is a lot darker than this one. I want to give the idea that this one's much further away, and making this one darker and this one lighter is going to make it seem like that's true. It's going to make it seem like something other. This paper laying flat is true about the world. Okay. You can add a little bit of intrigue to this one in the background, but it should mostly be pretty hazy. Whereas this one can have some mountain ranges, and this one can have some serious stuff going on. So let's turn our attention to this one. I am not gonna lay a wash down on this one. This time around I'm gonna let it be a little blotchier, but I'm gonna make sure I've got the colors I want ready to go before I start painting it, so I can kind of work the whole mountain in one pass. So I need some more Payne's Gray. You guys will get tired of this color, but it's just so good. I think I said in my other video, I usually make it with raw umber, not raw sienna, but hey, dirt is dirt. Okay, I've got my raw sienna. Now I want to make up a green that's not quite this grassy, not quite this springy. I want more of like a a sappy green. I'm gonna use the same mixing well because I'm not gonna need this light green again. That color is a one and done. Okay, green and a Viridian. I think for this color I just used Viridian and a bit of that. Guess what? Raw sienna. Sienna, the paint is named after the region of Sienna. And it's just like the color of the dirt there, and it's a pigment that they make from like the clay or the dirt. So umber is the same, like umber is from the umber region. It's a nice like sappy green there. Got my Payne's Gray, that's my super watery Payne's Gray. So what I want to do here is I want to kind of blot in with like blobby shapes the green along the highlight. And if I get too dark, I'm just going to come lift with a thing, and then I'm going to come back with the Payne's Gray and blob in and then fade that down towards where the fog is sitting down here. All right, so starting with the green. That's what I mean by like blobby. I just kind of smashing the brush onto it. I'm not really like painting. Makes that wonderful like little ch-ch-ch-ch sound. That's how you know you're doing it right. You get the ch-ch-ch. It's like dancing, but with very little effort, because it's just a paintbrush. So there's my like green edge to that mountain. And then my Payne's Gray is gonna start blobbing into that. And there's no rush, you know, with this. If it's not perfect on this layer, you got the next layer. You can take your time. You can dance if you want to. You can leave your friends behind. You can dance with your brush. Don't dance. I'm really sorry about what just happened here. Let's not tell anyone. It's not posted on the internet for everyone to see. So you can see here we're starting to get that sort of blobby, like maybe there's some trees, maybe there's a shape of something here that I can define. And similar to what's going on here where I defined some like mountain ridges, we'll probably shade some of that in here. Maybe not on this layer, because I don't want to mess with that. Testing my wetness here. It is time to go pet the cat. I don't want to work the foreground any more than the first wash until I get all this done, because some of the stuff in the foreground is going to overlap this. It's going to come up above it, and I just don't want that to. It'll get messy. And one of the things you need about your foreground is you need like really crisp lines, because you have the highest contrast in the foreground. So we're just going to take a break. Go pet the cat. Okay, the cat is thoroughly petted and we are dry enough. So if I compare this to the one I was sort of aiming for, I'm pretty happy with the sky. I'm pretty happy with this mountain right here. I feel like I need to darken up this one some, and I definitely need to do some work, and I haven't even touched the foreground. So sort of that half of the painting is done. I do want to keep this one smooth, so I'm going to lay in some water here on this line, on this mountain. I don't want to work it. If I just lay the water down perfectly, it'll leave the contrast that I've left up there. I'm also hoping that I can crispen this up here. I need some more Payne's Gray. Let's get that going. Here's my Payne's Gray. Okay. And because I've got that water and like that's wet, that's not wet, but this is wet, that's gonna help crisp that edge up. best to kind of start where it's darkest and pull the paint down. That'll keep me from getting too hazy, too dark in places where I want it to be hazy. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that there. So now I've got basically more than half of it done. This is good, this is good, this is good. So now I'm gonna work here. And I'm definitely not going to wet this whole thing. I don't wanna mush that up. I actually wanna make sure I've got some really intense pigmented Payne's gray. So when a color is really pigmented, that means it's gonna go on dark. And I'm not gonna have any too much water in it. And it's hard to mix up watercolor without too much water, because it's sort of like, you know, it's like it's in the name or something. Watercolor. Oh yeah, right, it's the first word. Yeah, first word of the name. All right, there's my Payne's gray. And yes, I contaminated my blue, but I'm not gonna use my blue for anything else, so it's all right. And everything in this painting is basically like 3 colors, so that helps it. All right, so if I look here on this one, I do like that I kind of divided this up into some mountain range. So I'm gonna start to push that in there now. Some little like edges. So maybe this comes down. So this is like darker through here. Trees, making the blobby bits. Maybe like here. It's like another area. It's darker. And just add those dark places in. And then they fade out. Where they got the haze kind of pushing up here. First washes go quick, and then the rest of it's kind of finicky, but sort of hypnotically fun, I think, anyway. I'm gonna add some green on those highlights that are coming down. Coming down the mountain. And yeah, I've got some green in here with this Payne's gray, and that's okay. It's all a good story. All right, so I'm actually pretty happy with where that's sitting, and there's my original. Like I said, I've got a little more haze going on in this, and I'm kind of happy with that. I like how that's feeling. You don't have to make it look just like mine. You can make it look just like yours. All right, so now in the foreground here, the first thing I need in the foreground, and I can go ahead, this isn't wet enough that I don't have to work, and I'll probably work from here up, so by the time I get to here, it'll be dry enough. So this green color that I mixed here is a little bit darker than that. I'm gonna mix up some more of that relatively pigmented, and I'm gonna do some sort of blobby tree-like strokes, paint strokes with that in like a medium green. So usually with something like a foreground that's foliage, I work in at least 3 shades of green. So I'll have like a springy green, a medium green, and then I will have like a Payne's gray-y green, or maybe just Payne's gray, because if you wash the Payne's gray on top of green, it turns a little bit green. So I'm gonna make sure I got plenty of pigment here in this green color. And that it's a green color that I really like. Okay, test that out. You can see that. I don't know if you can see that actually. That's the one that's laid down there. That's my second one. And then that'll be like my third one. So they're really far apart, and that's gonna help with my contrast. So I'm gonna do like some kind of blobby things and some kind of strokey things, and it'll be some sort of like grassy, grassy tree story. You can be more specific with this. If you want to have more specific story. I think in the foreground of that one, in my darkest color, I use Payne's Gray to make some like pine-shaped tree things. And this wants to be all over, but it can have, just like this has some hills and valleys, like this can have some valleys too. Like maybe it's darker in here in these little recesses, and maybe it's darker in here. And that just keeps me from getting bored when I do this. Giving myself some excitement. Strokey, blobby, C shapes. Don't get too random or it'll get confusing, but I'm mostly into my blobbies, but you may find other strokes that work really well for you. As they say, different strokes for different folks. Remember I said I divided this up into two, so this is where like that dividing line comes down between the two. So this will stay like a highlight, and I'll pull some Payne's Gray into that one. Because this is a pigmented color too, it doesn't go as far. I'm probably gonna have enough to do this side of my blobby strokey green, and then I'm gonna have to come back and mix some more green. And when I said I'd have enough to do this side, I lied. I don't quite have enough to do this side. I need some more. So you don't want to cover everything, and you don't want to leave everything, and you want it to sort of be everywhere but have darker and lighter areas. And that's the discretion of the artist. I'm like 2 coffee cups away from talking about happy little trees over here. You can test that, make sure that's in the same realm. That's in the same realm as the color that I was working with. Yeah, that's fine. When you're working small like this, if your colors are a little different from each other, it usually doesn't show. When you're working big, like a scenic artist, you really don't want to get into this situation and make sure that you mix enough color, or if you don't, that you know how you made the color, so that you can mix more. There's my thing, and I'm going to start down here and pull this blobbiness up. And again, maybe I've got some shadows through here. Maybe this mountain has sort of got ridges that come this way. And this is what I'm talking about here. Like I want these like colors that meet here into this mountain to be really crisp. That's going to make them feel like they're in the foreground. It's going to pull them forward. More green. Ooh, that's mustard. You'll find often that your browns are more pigmented than you would think, because the brown pigments are cheaper, so it's cheaper and easier to make nice brown paint than it is to make nice, Viridian. These are reasonably nice watercolors. I think they're like $4 or $5 a tube. Maybe a little more. I bought them years ago. Half of them were on sale. And so I decided to buy myself a nice set of these watercolors. If you're working with the pans, you're gonna have to make sure that you really paste hard to get some of these intense colors, especially for the foreground. The background washes will be easier, and the foreground washes will be a little harder to get that level of intensity that I have going on here. But as long as you've got, the goal is really to make sure that this is a different world from this. And already we've got like a sharper contrast here than here, but when we add the third, remember we're not even at our darkest color yet. So when we add that third color in, we're not gonna put that color everywhere. That the lightest color went like everywhere. This color goes most places, but leaves some highlights. And then that third color, that third dark Payne's gray color is really not gonna go everywhere. And I'm gonna go ahead and start with it over here. I've definitely got some wetness going on here. And I don't wanna work wet into wet. I wanna make sure that everything dries before I come in and do it. So I'm gonna avoid that wet area until it's dry. But I want this to be my last video clip for this exercise. I'm gonna mix up some really pigmented Payne's gray. And if I'm worried that that's too blue, too gray, not the right color, you can add some Viridian into that if you want it to be more towards the green, as long as it's really dark. You can see this color here, like that's my Payne's gray, and that's greenier. I kind of prefer the Payne's gray, but that one is up to you. So I'm gonna start down here and make some like foreground tree shapes. Just like I did on the sample one. Because the idea is I'm showing you how to do that. Happy little trees. So I do feel like this whole situation, COVID-19, is kind of like a big, long sick day that we're all taking. Even though not all of us are obviously sick, thankfully, hopefully. Check on your senior citizens. And I definitely, like, my thing that got me through sick days was the joy of painting with our dear friend, Bob Ross. So this is maybe the my version of that. You can see really high levels of contrast here, and that kind of pops that forward. If you wanted to be finicky and make these like more tree shapes, you can. I'm more worried about perspective here, learning about how to separate your background from your foreground, than I am about perfect tree shapes. You'll find in these pigmented layers, you go through your paint really quick, so I have to keep mixing up the paint here. This is my last color and my last step, so I'm being a little reckless with cross-contamination of colors, and you know, you can sue me. The cross-contamination paint committee will come knocking at my door. Listen, man, we know there's a national crisis, but you've been contaminating your paints. Just see it happening. Okay, and then this one here, I want to make sure that I leave, I'm going to come back here. I want that to dry before I mess too much in that, but I want to make sure that I leave, like, this gets really dark and this gets really light, so I made it really clear that this is like cutting in front of that range, even though they're both in the foreground. Now, for funsies, if you want to consider this, if you actually get through watching all this before you do your own project, you can consider doing a sunset look like I did on the the one I actually abandoned. And the way you do that is you blend the blue sky down, but then you mix up a sunset color, and sunset's sort of like a red, orange, pinky, corally color. It will be a different color depending on what, you know, exactly your sunset is. Yay, more Payne's Gray. And then you would blend that from the horizon up. Where that gets tricksy as well is it also affects the colors of the tops of the mountains in the background. So look that up if you're going to try to do that. But you can go ahead and try to add a sunset to your sky if you're feeling ambitious, or maybe you want to do a second one. Whoa, that's too much. If you want to do a second one that has that. Your friend, the Q-tip. When the colors are just too much. You can also use a wet Q-tip if you wanted to like blend something out a little more without like messing up the whole thing. I want this little part here to be a little bit darker, and I think it's dry enough for me to add. It's gonna be pure, as pigmented as I can get it. Payne's Gray. You can just buy a tube of Payne's Gray as well. It's like a color you can buy. But you know, I refuse. That's kind of what I wanted with that separation there between those mountain ranges. And just to show you what I was talking about with the Q-tip, let's say like I thought that was a little harsh there, that blend. Got some water on the edge of my Q-tip. I want to make sure it's not like dripping, but just like a little wet. You can kind of soften that up without moving around any more color than you really want to. And that can be useful on various things. So that's just a little trick. On the original one, I got too much color on the highlight parts of these mountains. So like, let's say I wanted this little ridge in here to lighten up. I could lift some color on it like that. And that helps pull that out. So that is your atmospheric perspective mountain tutorial. That's what we are going for. That's what we did. Without trying too hard to copy it, I feel like we got there in a pretty good way. So hopefully this is helpful to you. Reach out to me on the Discord server if you have questions and about anything I left out.